Richard Baldwin, your host with Jerry Branham, talking about stories from the Iron Age. And this time we want to talk about Bill Pearl, one of my heroes. And Jerry, I know you've met Bill and you know him better than I do.
Yeah, I actually, Bill Pearl, and by the way, Mike Menser, old friend of mine, Mike Menser. Of course, most people in bodybuilding know who he was. Both of us, idolized Bill Pearl around the same time. Menser's was about a year younger than me. I remember having a conversation. Coincidentally, we both kind of latched on to Bill Pearl as our bodybuilding idols right around the same age, which was interesting. I could tell you how it all happened with me. What happened was I was looking at a now defunct, this magazine's been dead for years. It was called, do you remember Strength and Health Magazine?
Oh, yeah.
Rich?
Oh, yeah.
It was published by Bob Hoffman.
That was the first cover I was on. It was in that magazine, yeah.
Strength and Health. In fact, I was in Strength and Health Magazine. They used to have a feature called Man of the Month. And I was a finalist back in 1969. But anyway, I was looking through that magazine. That's one of the first magazines I bought. In fact, the first two bodybuilding magazines I ever purchased, one of them was Ironman Magazine. And I still remember the guy on the cover. It was 35 cents back then. It was a small magazine. The guy on the cover was a bodybuilder. I don't know if you remember a guy named Chuck Pranke. Do you remember a guy named Chuck Pranke from the...
No, actually.
He was from the 60s. He had a nice physique, not a big guy. But he was posed standing next to a bicycle, like he was dressed like in bicycle gear. I still remember that. It's amazing. I was only 12 years old when I bought that. And then right after that, I bought my first issue of Strength and Health, and it had a track and field athlete on the cover. It wasn't a bodybuilder. It showed him standing there holding two shot puts in each hand. His name was Gary Gubner.
Oh, yeah. Olympic champion.
Yeah, he had a tank top on that said NYU. I guess that's where he went to school. He was a real big, thick guy who actually, I think he held the world record at that time in the shot put.
Yeah.
But I remember that issue had the report of the 1962 AAU Mr. America, which was won by a guy named Joe Abenda, who I later met. I have an interesting story about him.
I met him at the 68 America.
Right.
After he was long gone, finished competing.
Yeah. Joe Abenda is an interesting story. Maybe I'll tell it in this video about Joe Abenda. But anyway, because he was also kind of closely related to Bill Pearl. But what happened was, I don't know, was that issue or the next issue? I'm looking through that. I was 12 years old. I'm looking through the magazine, and I see this picture of Bill Pearl, and what it was is a tricep shot of him just with his arm hanging down. And it looked like a damn piece of the horseshoe. I mean, I'd never seen an arm like that. And I remember reading the caption. It said, "Bill Pearl, Mr. America, has a 21-inch arm." And I'm, holy cow! I said, 21-inch arm, And so, I immediately cut the picture out, and I put it on my wall. And then what happened was I started actually. I noticed about a couple of months later, Bill Pearl started selling some courses, how to build big arms, how to build big forearms, how to gain muscle size, blah, blah. He had a couple of courses, and he wrote it with his kind of partner, a guy who used to train him named Leo Stern.
Oh, yeah.
That was Bill Pearl's kind of main photographer. Leo Stern had a gym in San Diego where Bill Pearl trained at that gym when he won the Mr. America in 1953. And so I actually, they had an address in the courses. I used the courses, and actually I was training at a gym where I could only train 3 times a week, but I used the courses, and I started gaining. I was only 12 years old. I started,
holy mackerel.
I started gaining like crazy, using the system that Bill Pearl listed. Luckily, I managed to get on to a knowledgeable source of training information. I could have really screwed up and messed myself up, but I latched onto these courses. They weren't very expensive. They were like $3 each, something like that. But, they had an address in there, and I was 12 years old, and I started, and I wrote to Bill Pearl. And, I didn't really expect an answer. I was surprised to about 2 weeks after I wrote the letter, I got an answer. And anyway, to make a long story short, this went on for 2 years.
Wow.
I corresponded with Bill Pearl, and then I started getting the letters started coming rather than from San Diego. The letters started coming from Bill Pearl. He had a gym at that time in a place called Englewood, California. It was on Manchester Boulevard, and he was writing to me in longhand. The letters I got from San Diego were typed.
Do you still
So,
have those?
oh, I wish I did. I don't. I don't
Oh
have.
man.
But I mean, the typed letters, I honestly don't know whether it was Bill Pearl or Leo Stern who was writing to me. I don't know. It might have been somebody else. I don't know. But when I got the letters in longhand from Manchester Avenue, that was Bill Pearl. You know, because later on I saw him autographed, and I realized it was definitely his writing. I remember once asking him a question. I said I had read that Steve Reeves, Steve Reeves, of course, 1947 Mr. America, who was the Hercules of the movies. He had written an article where he said he never, when he went to sleep, he didn't lie on pillows because he felt that pillows weakened his neck. I mean, it's laughable now, but remember, I was 12 years old. I didn't know what the truth was.
Yeah.
So I went to Bill Pearl, and I said, Bill, I'd read that Steve Reeves doesn't sleep on pillows because it causes a weak neck. And Bill Pearl wrote back, I remember him saying, Jerry, I can tell you that I sleep on pillows all the time, and I never notice any weakness in the neck, So anyway, so I should also mention that, in 1964, I believe, I joined a gym in New York City called Mid-City Gym.
Oh, that's a famous one.
Right, and I got friendly with a guy named John, oh God, I can't remember his last name. But anyway, he was at that time the editor-in-chief of Muscle Builder magazine. It was called Muscle Builder. Later became Muscle and Fitness.
Yeah.
And at that time, Joe Weider was located, his company was located in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So this guy trained he's a tall guy with glasses. He trained at Mid-City Gym. I got friendly with him. And through him, I got the addresses. At that time, I was 14 years old. I got the addresses of all the top bodybuilders, Reg Park, Larry Scott, all of them.
Wow.
And I wrote to them. Remember, I had been writing to Bill Pearl already for about 2 years. I wrote to them and asked them, if they, how much they would charge. I remember I didn't expect anything for free, even at the age of 14. I knew better. And I asked them what the charge would be to respond to some questions I had about training and nutrition. And nobody answered me. Nobody answered me, but Bill Pearl continued to write to me.
Well, that's cool.
So, I remember there was an incident in Mid-City. I idolized Bill Pearl so much that I had a little scrapbook. I used to keep pictures of Bill Pearl to inspire me. I called it my Bill Pearl scrapbook, And I ran into a guy.
Like this. I'm holding up some pictures of Pearl that I took to the gym every time I went. And as well, I took some of Larry Scott too, but these are what he's the reason I probably won the best arms in the USA in the 78 USA contest.
I can believe
because
that.
His triceps blew my mind, and Larry Scott's biceps blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so the thing is, I was in the gym in Mid-City one day, and I met this guy. I don't remember his name, so many years ago. But we started talking about Bill Pearl, and it turns out he kind of like idolized Bill Pearl. And he mentioned that he had a Bill Pearl scrapbook, like me. And this guy was an older guy. It looked like he was in his 30s. I was 14 years old. So, I said, is there any way I could see your Bill Pearl scrapbook? So he brought it to the gym. And I was like astounded because he had all these early photos of Bill Pearl from the 50s.
Wow.
He had pictures of Bill Pearl with a beard, with pictures I had never seen. And I said, look, how much would you want for that scrapbook? He wouldn't sell it.
Yeah.
He just wouldn't sell it, and another time at Mid-City Gym that I remember, the owner of the gym was a guy named Tom Minicello. And everybody knew that I idolized Bill Pearl. In fact, they used to call me Bill Pearl Jr. That was my nickname. And Tom Minicello came up to me one day. He says, hey, Jerry, there's a guy coming to the gym today who's coming right from California. He actually trains at Bill Pearl's gym. I said, oh, great. I said, I'd love to meet him. So, this guy comes to the gym, and, I introduced myself to him. And I remember he was wearing shorts. And the first thing I looked down at his calves. His calves were immense.
Dickerson, right?
And I said, and he introduced himself as Chris Dickerson.
Yeah.
and he had a shirt on that said, he had the official Bill Pearl's gym shirt on.
Cool.
So I bombarded him with questions
I
about,
bet you did.
Chris had already won some titles, and he
Yeah.
told me he was training. Bill Pearl was his trainer, and he answered, and he was such a nice guy that he very patiently he answered all the questions I asked him about Bill Pearl, and he started calling me Bill Pearl Jr. too.
That's great.
So, but the most interesting happened. The most interesting thing happened about a year later. Dan Lurie announced, he used to hold contests. Dan Lurie had a magazine. He was kind of a competitor of Joe Weider, and he used to hold contests in New York. And I remember he was having a contest at Hunter College in New York, and his guest poser was going to be Bill Pearl himself. So I said to myself, oh my God, this is my chance to meet Bill Pearl in person. So I went to the contest, and I managed to get backstage, and I'm asking people, where's Bill Pearl? Where's Bill Pearl? And I noticed that, they said they pointed to this long staircase. It looked like it went up to this, God knows where, it went all the way up, you know? And I started to go towards the staircase, and suddenly this guy blocked me. He said, sorry, son, nobody is allowed up here. And I recognized him. It was Leo Stern. So I said, well, I just want to say hello to Bill. I've been writing to him. My name is Jerry Brainham. He says, Jerry, oh yeah, I know who you are. He says, oh yeah, go up, Bill.
Oh man.
He says, Bill, be happy to meet you.
How cool is that?
So he stood aside, and I walked up about 5 flights of stairs, all the way up to almost like an attic in this auditorium. And there in the middle of the room, just standing there, was Bill Pearl. And he looked at me a little startled that I had managed to get up there. And I went up to him, and I said, Bill, I said, I'm Jerry Brainham. I said, I've been writing to you for a couple of years. And he says, you're Jerry? I said, yeah. He says, how old are you? I said, I'm 16. He says, my God. He says, I thought you were in your late 20s by the way you write. In other words, like I didn't write like a kid.
Right.
Because I already, even though I wasn't a professional writer back then, I had already read like dozens of books, and I started reading.
You were
when
literate.
I was very literate. I knew how to write even at 16. I knew grammar. I knew it all. So we started talking. He was the greatest guy. What a nice guy. I mean, I shook his hand, and I was even more impressed by him. I said, Bill, I just wanted to thank you personally for having the patience and I know you're a busy guy.
Yeah.
I think you're a great person to answer my letters the way you did. And, and he mentioned that he was going to compete in the Mr. Universe again in 1967. I think that was a year later. And I wished him the best of luck. And, he posed that night, and he looked great. He brought the house down. I mean,
did you get your picture taken with him?
Unfortunately, I didn't, I didn't have the camera. This is the days before everybody, nobody had cell phones,
Yeah.
I didn't bring a camera with me, and I didn't even think about it. I'm so excited about the possibility of meeting Bill Pearl. I didn't even think about it. So
Leo probably did. You probably should say, hey, Leo, get over here.
I should have thought about that, because Leo, of course, was a photographer.
Yeah.
And Leo himself was a former bodybuilding competitor.
Yeah.
I think he got like second or third to Clancy Ross in the 45 Mr. America.
Yeah.
So, and he was a great guy too. Leo Stone was a terrific guy, anyway, the point is that, Bill Pearl was, when I moved out to California, Bill Pearl by that time had moved his gym to Pasadena, and I visited his gym quite often. And I got to tell you, there was one story where he inadvertently hurt my feelings. It's kind of a funny story. What happened was I was training with a guy at that time. This is in the early 70s. I was training with a guy named Jeff Smith. Now, Jeff was
Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, Jeff was a good friend of mine. And he had a real natural mesomorphic physique. He had like big calves, small waist.
Yeah.
The best way to describe Jeff, he was kind of like a combination of Steve Reeves and Reg Park together.
Yeah.
And tremendous potential. And Jeff and I think it was 72, Bill Pearl was going to compete again for the final time in the Miss Universe in London. The
71, yeah.
Yeah, 71. Was it 71? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
71. And he later told me that the only reason he competed in that universe was to help publicize his gym. He really didn't care about competing, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
we'll talk about that later about his biography and his
yeah,
what
yeah,
he says in there about he didn't really want to compete.
right. Yeah, there's some interesting aspects about involving Sergio even and
Yeah.
Arnold. You know, we'll get to that later. But the point is that Bill Pearl guest posed. It was the Mr. California contest in '71. I competed, and both Jeff and I trained for that for a solid year, and we both competed. I didn't place, but Jeff, I think, got third or something like that in the California. I think it was won by, if I remember correctly, it was either won by Dale Adrian, who went on to win the Mr. America, or Vic Tanny Jr. You know, I can't remember, one of those two guys won, but I know they were both there.
Yeah.
Both of them were very nice guys, but Dale Adrian was extremely introverted, had a nice physique, narrow shoulder, almost like a Larry Scott type physique.
Yeah.
But Vic Tanny Jr. also had a great, of course, his father was very famous Vic Tanny gym operator. Also a very quiet but very nice guy. You know, I remember them. And anyway, Jeff and I both, about 2 days later, went to Bill Pearl's gym in Pasadena. And you remember, Bill Pearl was a judge at the Mystic. He was a judge. Besides being guest poster, he also judged that contest. And so, Jeff and I are sitting in his office talking to him, and I said to him, Bill, what'd you think of the way I looked at the cow? So he said, he says, I don't remember you, but I certainly remember this young man. He points to Jeff, and he says, boy, he says, son, you have tremendous potential. He says you can go on to be probably a national or international bodybuilding champion. So I said, Bill, you didn't see me at all? He says, no, I don't even remember you being there.
Wow. Don't.
And I'm thinking, geez, I've idolized this guy for years, and he kind of insulted me, and I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Honestly, I felt like crying. I was really hurt, but I got even with him about a year later. I'll tell you how it happened. Again, I went to his gym, and this time it's only me and Bill Pearl. We're sitting in his office.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me, we were talking about training, and he says to me, he says he trains at 4:00 in the morning. I said, Bill, why do you train that early? He says, Jerry, how he used to talk, Jerry, if I didn't train that early, he says, I'd never train at all, because I put in like 16-hour days here at the gym. And by the end of the day, I'd have no desire to train at all. So I get it all done first. That's what he said. That was his kind of style of talking. So then we got on this subject of steroids, right? And by that time, he had already won that final Mr. Universe contest, which I was congratulated on. He looked great, by the way. And I said to him, Bill, there's one thing that bothers me. Can I be honest with you? He says, go ahead. I said, I see you write in the magazines. You always say that you don't use anabolic steroids. I said, now, Bill, it's only you and me in the room. We've known each other for years. You know how much I admire you as a person. I mean, can you really look me in the eye and tell me that you never used anabolic steroids? Seriously. I mean, I won't say anything. I really want to know. Just between you and me. So he looked at me and he said, Jerry, he says, you know how you've admired me since you were a young kid? I said, yes, absolutely. He says, the reason I say that is because there's a lot of young kids all over the place like you who admire me. And if I told people, if I admitted using anabolic steroids, I'm afraid these kids would use steroids to try and emulate what I did in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And I feel bad about it. So yeah, I give a little white lie. I say that I didn't use steroids.
Yeah.
He said, I said, okay, all right, fine. I perfectly understand. And, I won't say anything, but I know that Bill, I remember I told him about my scrapbook that I had. I said, I remember seeing pictures of you when you won the 1953 Mr. America. And then I saw a photo of you posing in 1959. And then I saw a picture of you when you won your 61 Mr. Universe in London. I said, in the difference between the 59 and the 61 picture, you look like you put on 40 pounds of muscle, solid muscle. I said, you went from being like an average size bodybuilder to a tremendous bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Basically what happened was I found out later Bill Pearl tells the story. I think it's in that autobiography. He claims that around 1959, he came across a sort of a doctor who was working out of a veterinary school up in University of California, Davis Veterinary School. And the guy told him about a new class of drugs called anabolic steroids. And he told Bill Pearl about a particular oral steroid called Nilevar. And so Bill Pearl started using Nilevar. And supposedly, Bill Pearl tells the story that it was Nilevar. He admitted using Nilevar, and he admitted it did put on some muscle, you know?
Yeah.
So,
because I think that was in a magazine long ago, before it became such a no-no.
Yeah, it was also in the magazine. Now, you see, if you know anything about anabolic steroids, a lot of people don't know that much about steroids. And the thing is, you know, Nilevar is it's an oral steroid. It's a mild steroid. Nilevar is not the type of steroid that's going to put on like 30 pounds of muscle.
Like Dianabol, huh?
Yeah, it's not like Dianabol. It was kind of a weak steroid. So, you know, I'm not saying Bill Pearl is lying, you know, and he might have also taken testosterone without admitting it. I that's all speculation. But on the other hand, Bill Pearl, to his credit, you know, and people overlook this when they talk about steroids, is that Bill Pearl trained very heavy, very hard, and very consistently. Bill Pearl used to use like over 300 pounds of press behind the neck. He would do dumbbell curls with like 75, 80 pounds. When you're lifting that kind of weight and you're taking even small amounts of steroids, you are going to put on a lot of muscle. Because, you know, I mean, so it's very...
Especially if you've got his genetics.
Yeah, Bill Pearl had great genetics.
I mean, his brother was huge, wasn't he? And he didn't even train, except for a little while.
Yeah, you know, and another interesting fact about Bill Pearl, a lot of people might not know, is if you look at the early articles about Bill Pearl, such as when he won the American 53, they describe him as of Scotch, Irish, and English descent.
When he's Native American.
In point of fact, Bill Pearl was born October 31st, 1930 in Yakima, Washington.
On a reservation, I think.
Bill Pearl was on a reservation. Bill Pearl was a Native American. And I asked him once, I said, Bill, why did you disguise the fact that you were a Native American for so many years? Whereas now you have like little cartoons of you wearing an Indian headdress, and you seem to be proud of your Native American heritage. He said, Jerry, you have to understand, in those days, there was a lot of prejudice against Native Americans. He says, I passed for white. I said, well, not that. I said, Bill, I was always a little suspicious of you because you had the darkest tan of any bodybuilder I've ever seen.
It glowed.
In fact, you were so dark, your tan, that when you competed against a unknown bodybuilder at the 1953 Miss Universe, a Scottish bodybuilder who was using the name Tom Connery, later known as Sean Connery, Agent 007. Sean Connery many years later, went on the Tonight Show and talked about how he competed in the Miss Universe in 1953. And he said that he lost to a black guy named Bill. I said, Bill, Sean Connery thinks you're a black guy. I said, so,
Did he laugh?
Yeah, he laughed. I said, I'm kind of like not really surprised. Yeah, I was always a little suspicious of that, the way you tan. You got a little bit too dark. So, he thought that was, he got a good laugh out of that.
Dennis Tenorino, I became friends with him. And even when I was out there in California too and when Tony Pearson was staying with him and stuff, and we do some things together. But anyway, Dennis told me that he did the same thing. He said, Bill, why are you lying about your steroid use? And he said the same thing. Because of the kids, man. They don't want them getting all on that stuff.
Yeah.
So
Dennis Tenorino was a close friend of mine. I knew him from Brooklyn. And Dennis used to, go out there and train at Bill Pearl's gym. And, he used to tell me about Bill and Bill Pearl even gave, Bill Pearl used to wear these kind of like silver, remember those silver trunks he wore?
Yeah.
There's a couple of famous pictures of him wearing these, that famous relax pose, taken. Hopefully you'll show it in the video.
Were they silver or gold?
They were like, one of them was gold and one was silver.
Okay, yeah. But they sparkled.
Yeah, sparkle. That's it. Sparkle. It's a famous shot of him in a relaxed pose taken by Leo Stern, where he literally has absolutely flawless physique. I mean, absolutely flawless. Anyway, he's just standing relaxed with his crew cut he had back then, and you know, he gave Dennis a pair of those speckled trunks. I think Dennis wore them in a couple of the contests that he
Yeah.
wore. I even got a pair of those trunks, you know, and I wore them in a couple of contests. But I remember there was a time when I came out to California, I figured, well, if Bill helped Dennis Tenorino, he helped Chris Dickerson, maybe he could help me because I was still competing in bodybuilding shows. So he gave me some programs, some training programs, and I remember that I still remember that each workout started out with 12 different abdominal exercises done 100 reps each. So that means you did 1,200 reps of ab work even before you began weight training.
It's like,
You know?
that's like Zane does.
Yeah. So I said to him, you know, I said, you know, and I remember Bill saying to me, he says, you know how I judge the shape I'm in, Jerry? I said, how's that? He says, I look at my abs. He says, my abs aren't clearly visible. I know that I have to go on a diet or increase my ab work. That's what he told me. So that his reasoning of doing all that ab work was he felt that abs were the primary indicator of muscle conditioning, and that when you compete in the show, if you had great abs, it kind of gave the impression that you were in great shape everywhere else.
Yeah.
And then the funny thing is, if you look at photos of Bill Pearl, there's many photos where he looks relatively smooth and the rest of his body, his legs had no cuts in them at all, and yet his abs were very sharp.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was amazing to see that. But the point is that I remember one of his routines, he had me doing a lot of side bends. You know, remember that old side bends exercise? And I said to him, well, Bill, you know, I'm not really narrow-waisted. I don't have a narrow waist. I'm afraid if I do side bends, I'll build up my obliques and have an even thicker waist.
That's why I never did them.
Right. So
Yeah.
Bill Pearl said to me, he says, well, Jerry, you notice I'm having you do 100 reps in the side bend exercise. He says, let me ask you a question. If you did 100 reps in barbell curls, what would happen to your arms? So I said, I guess they would either not grow or they'd shrink. He says, exactly. That's why I'm having you do 100 reps. So I figured, okay, Bill Pearl's the master. I'm going to do the side bends. Make a long story short, I put on 2 inches on my waist,
Yeah.
the side bends. And I realized that, you know, as great as I thought Bill Pearl was, as all humans are, he's not infallible.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to kind of think for yourself, and you have to use a little common sense.
Well, biomechanics didn't even exist back then. So
No.
everybody's doing these behind the neck things at presses, and that's the worst thing you can do for your shoulders, isn't it?
I did it myself. I used to do I got up to 350 pounds in press. And to this day, I have one of my shoulders, I can barely raise my arm.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, no, nobody knew about that stuff in those days. And in those days, I mean, Bill Pearl, you can't really put him down because, as you pointed out, Frank Zane, a lot of the guys at Gold's Gym, Zabel, Kazuski, and Bill Pearl himself, you know, they felt that doing a lot of ab work, high rep ab work, kept the waist small. In other words, they were all believed in this spot reducing concept, which it turns out is nonsensical. There's no such thing as spot reducing. You know, it's now known that when your body oxidizes fat, it oxidizes everywhere. It doesn't oxidize it in any local one area. You know, but you seem to accumulate fat more readily in the abdominal area, but that
I
has
think
to
that
do with
depends on race, doesn't it? 'Cause
race.
like Chinese, Asians seem to gain it kind of all over,
Yeah.
and blacks tend to gain it in the behind, and white guys tend to gain it in the back of their
Yeah,
side.
a lot of it has to do with the genotype, what they
Yeah.
call genotype. But the basic rule, though, is that I mean, they've done studies where they had people do thousands of sit-ups, and you know, and they used certain let's say imaging techniques where they can actually examine fat loss before and after the study. And what they found was that doing thousands of reps of ab work definitely toned the abs. In other words, they showed increased muscle tone. But when they measured the amount of subcutaneous fat over the abs, in other words, the amount of fat covering the abs, there was no change whatsoever. None. The abdominals got toned, but there was no localized fat reduction at all.
Yeah.
Zero. You know, and that study's been replicated many times since then. And yet the odd thing is, even today, Richard, and you know this to be true, you can go in many gyms and you'll still see people doing hundreds of reps of ab work
Yeah.
with this notion that, this is only a way to get a six-pack abs.
You know something that made me sad though that you said that I'd never heard before
What's that?
was that Bill Pearl was hiding his ancestry because of the prejudice back then.
Right.
And it made me think about, how bad blacks and others had it in bodybuilding contests. And they give them most muscular, but not the overall or something like that.
Oh, I've seen many examples of that. In fact,
Thankfully, that's changed in the modern world.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I remember there was one of the most egregious examples of that occurred during the 1959 AU Mr. America contest, which was won by a guy named Harry Johnson. I believe Harry is still alive. He's about 96 years old.
I didn't know that.
He's the oldest living Mr. America.
Wow.
Bill Pearl, at age 86, is the second oldest living Mr. America. But Harry Johnson, from all accounts, I never met the man, was a very nice person, a smart person. He worked in an aircraft factory. He tried to win the Mr. America about 7 years, and was one of the kept placing anywhere from second to fifth. Finally, I don't know whether it's just to get rid of him. In 1959, he won the contest, and Harry Johnson, the only thing he really had was abs. He didn't have. He looked like just a guy with a nice physique, no calves, just had great abs. That's it. But in that contest, the guy who placed, I think he might have placed sixth or something, I don't remember, was a guy named Arthur Harris.
Oh, I remember pictures of him. I freaked out that guy had an amazing physique.
Arthur Harris was a black bodybuilder who had a physique that was years ahead of his time.
Absolutely.
He had a physique that so overshadowed Harry Johnson and the rest of the guys that it was ludicrous to even compare them to Arthur Harris. And this happened again and again, over and over again, in the 50s all the way into the 60s. A personal friend of mine, a guy you might remember named Harold Poole.
Oh, yeah.
Met him at Mid-City Gym. Harold was a teenage bodybuilding sensation. In the 1962 Mr. America, he won the most muscular, but he lost to Joe Benda. But he looked much better than Joe Benda. And,
well, back then, their excuse was, I think, that Harold had a lisp, and they didn't want a Mr. America that had a lisp.
Now, how ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that?
They're looking for the all-American guy who could speak well and, represent the concept. Yeah.
That is so nonsensical. I remember the 1955 winner of the Mr. America was, again, with a guy with very little physique, very little muscle, a guy named Steve Klasanin. I remember reading that the reason he won the contest over him, he beat a guy named Bob Hines. He's not really remembered today. Bob Hines had a kind of blocky physique.
Yeah, I remember Bob.
But he was very thick and he was extremely vascular.
Yeah.
Nobody had veins in those days. This guy, Bob Hines, completely wiped out. Steve Klasanin was a pale, no tan, smooth. He looked like a swimmer. He didn't even look like a bodybuilder. Now, the excuse, the reason given for him winning the Mr. America that year was that he came across best in the interview. They used to do an interview of the Mr. America contestants. They felt that Steve Klasanin came across the best in the interview. In other words, he's the all-American guy.
When I entered the America in '76, I had to go through an interview just like that.
Right. So
it shows. And they, when I asked the judges later why I didn't place higher, they said your hair's too long. Get a haircut.
I mean, can you believe this? This is unbelievable.
They didn't like my hair. It's too long.
I mean, it's supposed to be a bodybuilding contest.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's very true. But and of course, I'm sure Bill Pearl was aware of this. And so he had to disguise his Native American heritage because, he probably would have not even won the Mr. America.
Well, he won every contest he entered, didn't he? Except for one. He won the Mr. Southern California. In '53 alone, he won Mr. Southern California, Mr. California, Mr. America, and Mr. Universe.
That's correct.
Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. I think
then he came back in '56, and that's the one where he got beat.
Got beat by Jack Dillinger in the Navy.
And that's the best Jack Dillinger ever looked before or since.
The best he looked at. And
Bill might have took it for granted, or he might have taken it for granted or something.
Yeah, well,
I don't know, but he got caught.
I'm not sure why, but I know at 56, Bill won the Mr. USA. I don't know what it's called, the
he won
professional
Mr.
USA.
USA.
Yeah, and I think at that same contest, Steve Reeves guest posed. And this is right before Steve Reeves went to Italy to film the Hercules movies. An interesting aspect of that is Steve Reeves, when he guest posed at that contest, was the heaviest he ever weighed in a bodybuilding well, he didn't compete.
Yeah.
Steve Reeves actually weighed 220 pounds.
Wow.
Now, Steve Reeves' contest weight was only 195.
Yeah.
So if you look at photos, Steve Reeves was much bigger than he ever appeared in any contest at that when he guest posted at the
I've
contest.
seen those photos too. Yeah.
There's a
His arms look so much bigger than they normally did.
Arms look bigger, and there's a shot of him doing a lat pose from the rear, where his back looks tremendous.
Yeah. So Bill came back in '61 and kicked butt, didn't he?
Yeah, he won the Pro Mr. Universe in London.
Yeah.
And interestingly, the guy who won the amateur division that year was a protege of Bill Pearl, a guy named Ray Rutledge, who also won the Mr. America that year in '61. Yeah. Ray was an Air Force. He was serving in the Air Force. I got to know Ray later on. Ray was a very nice guy, even though I almost got in a fight with him. He was briefly the manager of Gold's Gym in Venice, and I came in one day and he stopped me at the door, and he said, "Jerry, you can't train." I said, "Why? Why is that, Ray?" He says, "Your membership is up." I said, "Okay." The membership was freaking $60.
Yeah.
I said, "Ray, listen, nobody told me I'll pay the membership." So he says, "You can't train until you pay." I said, "Come on, Ray. We know each other. I met him at Vince's gym years ago." I said, "Ray, you know me. I mean, come on, what are you being a jerk for? I'll pay tomorrow." He said, "Oh, you can't train." I said, "Why you?" And I started cursing him, and they had to break us apart.
Wow.
I mean, this guy was a big guy. He was like 6'1". And I'm thinking, what the hell is his problem? What I didn't know at the time was that he was a heavy alcoholic.
Oh, man.
Subject to mood swings. So he was just freaked out. He was just in a bad mood. And we later made up. And, I was friends with him. He later passed away. But Ray Rutledge, by the way, actually won one of the lottery. He was a lottery. He won something like $3 million.
I didn't know that either.
And he burned it all away within a year.
Kidding. Yeah. How many lottery winners have done that too, though?
A lot.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost like a curse. Some of them have been broke. Yeah. Some of these won like $100 million, and within 2 years they're absolutely broke. You got to be careful. I know it's off topic, but my advice to anybody: if you're lucky enough to ever win a lottery, do not tell anyone.
Yeah.
Don't tell your relatives. Don't even tell your wife. I said, because it'll be a living hell for you if anyone knows you won a lottery. And if you're in a state where they have to identify you, don't come forward until you consult a lawyer.
Exactly.
A limiting corporation, an LLC, they'll accept the award fee, so your name will not really be released to the public. Every lottery winner who's won big money, who has allowed their name to be released, has suffered tremendous amounts of grief.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another topic,
But when I saw Bill Pearl, pictures of him from '67, I couldn't imagine somebody having a better physique than that. I mean, he blew me away in those photos.
Bill Pearl,
I didn't meet him till '71, so I didn't see him in person. But in '67, when I saw those photos coming out, I mean, I flipped.
Bill Pearl had no weak points. Other than that, he wasn't ripped. He wasn't shredded. But, I mean, he had a head-to-toe body.
But no one was back then.
Nobody. I mean, Bill Pearl won. I'll tell you why he won contests. It's very simple. First of all, his symmetry and proportion. I remember speaking to have you ever heard of a guy named Seymour Koenig?
Yeah.
Seymour competed in the early 50s. He competed against Bill Pearl. And I remember talking to Seymour, who's going to, by the way, he's going to be presented with an award at one of the Muscle Beach contests this year.
Oh, wow.
Seymour's a terrific guy. And I remember I was walking down the street talking to him one day, and I said, "Seymour, you knew Bill Pearl in the old days, didn't you?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Did you compete against him in the early phases?" He said, "I sure did. I was there and competed against him in the Mr. California. I was even there when he won the Mr. America." I said, "Well, what did you think of him? What did you and the other guys in the contest think of him?" He says, "Jerry, to be honest with you, we thought he wouldn't even place in the top 5. I said, why is that, Seymour? He says, you know what he looked like? He looked like a swimmer. I
Wow.
said, what do you mean? He says, nothing stood out on the guy. Nothing. I mean, he didn't have huge arms. He didn't have huge nothing. He just looked like a guy who like a swimmer.
Huh.
And so I said to him, I said, well, and I thought about it, and I realized, and looking at the photos, if you look at photos back in when he won in '53, when he won the America and the Universe that year, here's the reason why Bill Pearl won those contests: his symmetry. Yes, he wasn't the biggest guy in the contest.
Plus, he's a hell of a poser too.
Yeah, yeah. See, that's the other thing. But when you looked at Bill Pearl, you didn't see any weight points.
Yeah.
His arms were in total proportion to his torso, his legs, his calves, everything. He had all the muscles. He had complete total symmetry and proportion.
Yeah.
All the other guys lacked something. Bill Pearl had the most together. He wasn't the most muscular. He wasn't the biggest guy back then, but he had symmetry and proportion, and that's why he won. The second thing, the reason why, Bill Pearl took posing very seriously. He considered posing an art.
Yes, he did.
And he
Which is why Dickerson is such a great poser.
Exactly. He imparted that to Dickerson and Tenerino. All of his other acolytes learned from Bill Pearl the importance of posing. When he posed, you were mesmerized when you watched him pose. He just glided from each pose, and he knew how to, just like Larry Scott, look, we discussed in that previous video.
Yeah.
Bill Pearl knew how to hide his weak points and emphasize his strong points. And like Larry Scott, his strong points were his arms and his shoulders, and he emphasized that in his posing. He was a master poser. And he had a complete physique. And of course, he had that tan, which highlighted his physique. So, when you looked at him, you said, this guy's perfect.
Yeah.
He has to win.
He sure looked like it in '67. Oh, even with Schwarzenegger standing next to him. Didn't Schwarzenegger win the amateur?
Schwarzenegger won the amateur, and Bill Pearl, Schwarzenegger would look pale, and Arnold looked great that year. Don't get me wrong, but next to Bill Pearl, he looked like he had a couple of years to catch up to Bill Pearl.
Yeah.
Bill Pearl, it just looked like a guy, like an advanced version, Yeah. And as far as the 71 contest, Bill Pearl announced months in advance that he was going to.
I think it was a year in advance, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Neil Stern did it because Weeder was talking trash about him.
Yeah, we was talking bad, and we was saying that Arnold was going to compete and destroy Bill Pearl, and Arthur Jones had Sergio Oliva down in Florida, and he said he was going to send Sergio Oliva, and Sergio Oliva was going to destroy Bill Pearl.
And Leo went ballistic on Pearl. So you can't let him do that.
Yeah, in other words, all these people were threatening. Yeah. And of course, Reg Park was going to be who himself was I believe he was also a 4-time Mr. Universe winner. He was going to, and Reg Park was always a threat. So Bill Pearl, showed up, and
Frank Zane showed up.
Frank Zane, of course.
Ward Coe, I think too, didn't he?
I think he might have been that. I'm not sure about that, but I know that Arnold did not compete, but the rest of them did. And, Bill Pearl defeated Sergio Oliva. And if you look at the relaxed poses of all of them together, Bill Pearl actually looks better than Sergio in the relaxed pose because Sergio looks smooth.
Yeah.
Sergio didn't look like he looked
like he was off. Yeah.
He looked like he was off. He looked like he had 3 weeks to go.
Yeah.
Whereas Bill Pearl was at his peak. I mean, he wasn't super vascular, but he had to be vascular in his arms, His abs were in great shape. I mean, no superficial body fat. Bill Pearl deserved to win.
And that's the first time I met Bill, was at an exhibition. He was getting ready, and he's, giving exhibitions like the one you saw in '71. Right. And he gave one in Houma, Louisiana. So I drove from Tallahassee to Houma, Louisiana. Well, they asked me to be a judge at the contest too. So I went there to judge, and I got to see Bill Pearl. And the thing was, Boyer Coe was on the lineup too as a guest poser. So Coe posed first. Then Coe and I were both standing in the back of the auditorium waiting for Pearl to come on. And Boyer was just saying, I don't know why that old man's even entering, And Coe looked great. And he kept saying, he should just hang it up. And when Pearl stepped out, my eyes got this big. And I said, oh, Coe, you're in trouble. I didn't say it out loud because I like Boyer. He's a good guy. Yeah. But I mean, I could tell right there. I said, I don't think anybody's going to beat this guy. When I saw him pose there, it was like one of the Olympic gods came on stage and everything was perfect, head to toe. His hair, his tan, his trunks, every pose. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And after the contest, I went up and found where he and Leo were, and I got my picture taken with him. And I'll stick that in here in the film later. But it was like you ought to see my. Have you seen that picture of me in Pearl? My smile is so big. It's like,
I think I did.
You can tell I am so impressed, and just it's like one of the highlights of my life.
Right. Well, Bill Pearl, I think he talks about this in his autobiography, but he tells a story about that particular Mr. Universe contest. Shortly before the contest began, backstage, there was a young kid wandering around, asking the bodybuilders for autographs. So, the kid first went up to Sergio Oliva, and Sergio Oliva basically told the kid to beat it, get lost.
Leave me alone. Yeah.
And coincidentally, Sergio Oliva said the exact words to me when I approached him at the age of 14. When he first went over to the IFBB in Brooklyn many years. I told this to Sergio Oliva Jr., the story.
Yeah.
Sergio, when I approached Sergio for an autograph, way back then, Sergio looked at me and said, I'll tell you his exact words. He says, get the fuck out of my face. And, I looked at the guy. He was wearing a butcher's robe that had blood all over it, and he had scars all over his face, and he looked like a really dangerous character.
Wow.
So I just walked away. I didn't say anything. Anyway, this kid went up to Sergio at the London Universe, and, Sergio more or less said the same thing to him, and the kid then went over to Bill Pearl. Bill Pearl not only gave an autograph, but he put the kid on his shoulders and had a picture taken with him.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out, when Bill Pearl, he writes this in his book.
I know, I've read it.
It turns out that young boy was the son of one of the contest judges. So Bill Pearl used that as a parable to tell, to inform people that you never know who you're dealing with, and you should never cop an attitude. In other words, Sergio made the mistake of being antisocial, and Bill Pearl didn't go so far as to say that cost him the contest.
Yeah,
Sergio, but
it couldn't help.
It certainly didn't help by insulting the son of one of the judges of a contest he was competing in. How stupid can you get?
Yeah, but like you said, when you look at the photos, he looks good. It doesn't look like it was rigged or anything.
No,
he looked amazing.
No. Bill Pearl was a deserving winner of that show.
I know. Bill said one time that his head was too big, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? Your body's so huge, that head gives you perfect symmetry.
Oh yeah, no. Bill Pearl was he was a complete perfectionist, head to toe. He made sure the right trunks, the right pose. He made sure everything was right. I mean, he deserved to win, and then of course he retired, and Bill Pearl, of course, over the years he was involved with a couple of. He used to make appearances at various pro bodybuilding shows. One of the more controversial aspects was a 1980 Mr. Olympia, where I think, if I remember correctly, that was in Sydney. That was very controversial because that contest was won by Arnold, and a lot of people felt that Arnold should not have won. Bill Pearl was supposed to be the head judge at that contest. But it shows you, the integrity of the man. He recused himself from the judging because one of the competitors was Chris Dickerson.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, now that you mention it.
And of course, Chris was an acolyte. Was one of Bill Pearl's Bill Pearl trained him.
I think he should have won that year. To be honest, he came in second.
Chris, Chris.
I thought that was the best he ever looked before or since. Even better than when he won the Olympia.
Yeah, Chris. Either Chris.
Spot on.
I thought that either Chris, Mike Menser, or Frank, all of them, were superior to Arnold that year. Arnold,
Frank had that accident, so he lost a lot of weight. He was shredded, but he was smaller than he was the 3 times he won the Olympia.
That's true, but the thing is, Arnold, he looked like he lost too much muscle in the torso. Even his arms didn't look like
he definitely wasn't the Arnold of the past.
No, it wasn't Arnold of the past, but the most glaring thing was his legs. His legs were just, they looked like they were halfway there. I mean, he just did not deserve to win. I mean, it's a whole, A friend of mine, Randy Roach, who wrote the book, I think it's called Smoke and Mirrors. He's wrote several volumes. He wrote the history of bodybuilding and body. Fantastic. I strongly recommend anyone who's interested in all the history of bodybuilding should buy these books. But the most recent volume he came out with actually describes in detail all the intrigue involved in the 1980 and 81 Mr. Olympia. It's a very fascinating read. I mean, he interviewed, I was amazed and astounded to read some of the things that happened behind the scenes with that Mr. Olympia
Well, one of
contest.
Arnold's friends, Dan Howard, you know?
Yeah, I knew Dan.
He managed golds for a while and stuff. Anyway,
That's right.
he came up to me after that contest, just pissed off, said, "Look, I'm a friend of Arnold's, but there's no way he should have won that."
He said that to Arnold. Arnold Arnold, when Arnold got back to LA, he asked Dan Howard. I guess Dan had somehow either seen some photos or something. He said, "Hey Dan, what do you think? Should I have won?" And Dan said, "Arnold, you're my friend. I like you, but no."
Dan acted to me like he was there.
He might have been there.
Yeah.
He might have been. I don't remember, but I know that he told Arnold to his face that he didn't deserve to win, and Arnold didn't talk to him for 2 years.
You know, it's interesting. 1980 is the year that I met Bill Pearl for the second time.
Really?
He was at the Mr. Universe in the Philippines.
Yeah.
And Bill Pearl came up to me after prejudging, and he asked me, "Well, how do you think you did?" And I said, "I think I'm going to get second. This guy has a back that's just unreal, and I think they're going to put me second." And he said, "Wow, you're the first bodybuilder I've ever met that didn't say I'm going to win, really looked at an honest way and actually said you thought you were going to lose." And that's what I did. I lost. I came in second.
Well, you were a good arbiter.
Yeah.
But the thing about what was I going to say about Bill Pearl? I forgot. I can't.
You know what? I'll say this. This
What's that?
book is amazing. I mean, how many copies of Keys to the Inner Universe has he sold? I mean, whenever I get stale, I can look in here and find exercises I forgot about.
Are you talking about the Keys to the Inner Universe? Oh, okay. We should talk about that because that book, which I do have a copy of, that book. In fact, I have it. I can actually show it on screen.
I just did, but go ahead.
Yeah, Bill Pearl autographed it. But the point is that that particular book is the most extensive compendium of bodybuilding exercises. I think I could say this with confidence, ever published in bodybuilding history.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned in a previous video that we did about how Bill Pearl kept training diaries from the first time he ever touched a weight. He began training in 1950, and he recorded every workout he ever did. So what he did is, based on those training diaries, he came out with this book called Keys to the Inner Universe. It was called Volume 1. He never came out with a Volume 2. I don't know what Volume 2 could have contained because
I don't know.
He had like drawings of himself, which were very well done, very well done.
Yeah.
He had bicep, tricep. He had
every possible exercise for each of those muscles too.
Every exercise, and the thing about it is, it's a great. I mean, if you can, anyone can get I think it's out of print. Maybe Bill Pearl's still selling it on his site. I don't know, but I know that if anyone can get a copy of that, it's a great book to have, because whenever you get stale, let's say on the same bicep exercises or tricep, but you look in that book, it'll give you exercises that you could not imagine yourself doing.
That's what I do. I go to that book.
Exactly. It will add variety to your workouts. It'll increase your training enthusiasm. This is a book that I would never sell. I've had it ever since it came out. And I don't even know what it's worth, but I mean, that is the greatest.
I think that's the biggest seller, isn't it, of any book like that on weight training?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, he made a fortune on that book.
Bill later came out, his most recent book, I believe it's in 3 volumes. I can't remember the name of it. I have all 3 volumes.
I've just got Getting Stronger.
Getting Stronger is another book he had.
Yeah.
But his last, his most recent book was a 3-volume. It had to do with iron history.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
What he did is he worked on this for years, and he has biographies. Everybody in the iron.
He put those on his site a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he has everyone from Joe Weider, all the great bodybuilders in there. Even people that are obliquely related, so like equipment manufacturers. Arthur Jones is in there. He even has a couple of writers in there. I was a little bit peeved that he didn't include me, but well, that's
Can't
still
win them
another.
all.
Yeah, it's another insult that Bill Pearl did. But I'm willing to overlook that because honestly, I might complain about this, but the truth is, I'll say it, just point blank. I'll always be grateful to Bill Pearl, and I've told this to his face. The fact that he responded and corresponded to me for 2 years, took the time to
That's
answer.
amazing.
He didn't know I was a kid, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a very
Like you
kind
said, the
gesture.
other guys don't even pay attention to that.
No, no, they never even bothered answering me.
I mean, I was
You know,
getting so many letters at one time. I had a guy that was answering for them for me.
yeah, yeah, but the thing is that, Bill Pearl did this with many other people. He also answered Mike Mentzer's letters too. Mike told me that.
Yeah.
Mike was writing to him at the same time I was. So I mean, I'll always respect that and be grateful to that. And I think Bill Pearl is one of the more classy, good people in bodybuilding that I've met over the years, and I can't say anything bad about him. I mean, he's just a great bodybuilder. I think he's one of the greatest bodybuilders ever.
I do too.
And God
Absolutely.
bless him. And I mean, he's 86 years old. He's still. I don't know what his. I know the last I heard, he lived up. He lives up in Oregon. He converted a barn behind his house into a gym.
Yeah.
Still getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, all the way into his 80s to lift weights. Still training 6 days a week, 2 hours a day. If I know Bill, he's probably still doing that.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors that he has Parkinson's disease, which I was very distressed to hear.
Yeah.
And I wish the best. I mean, Bill. Another interesting aspect about Bill Pearl is he had severe problems with gout years ago. Native Americans, for some reason, have a genetic tendency to have gout. Gout is disease characterized by uric acid crystallization in joints. Uric acid, of course, is a metabolite produced in the body. And for some people, it tends to crystallize in joints and cause severe pain. Bill Pearl experienced that. And he did Bill Pearl was an intelligent guy. He did a little reading, and he traced it. He felt it had to do with his consumption of meat. So he cut out meat and became a lacto-ovo vegetarian.
Yeah.
And he was, lacto-ovo refers to consuming only milk and eggs, no meat, no fish.
Well, that's the highest protein anyway, right?
It's the best protein, the best biological protein anyway. And when he won the universe, he was a lacto-ovo vegetarian.
I remember that. I'm holding up a copy of his Beyond the Universe, the Bill Pearl story, just so that our anybody watching can see the cover of it. But that book has his basic history and some of the stories that we talked about.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's his autobiography, and I should actually. I wonder. Anyway, I should have brought out the 3-volume history book. That's his more recent. That's going to.
Yeah, that I don't have. I'm going to have to order that.
Yeah, that's going to. I ordered it even before it was published. I ordered a preprint. He offered like something like $50 off if you got a pre-published.
Oh, wow.
So I sent for it immediately. I read all 3, like one after another. Very well written, and I learned a lot of interesting things about some of the great strongmen of the past. Anybody who's interested in Iron Game history will absolutely love these books.
Well, I think he and Arnold and John Grimmick are 3 of the guys I consider to be the top in the history of the sport.
No question.
I'm not counting after they got into insulin and growth hormone and all that stuff, but those 3 gentlemen, great representatives of the sport, fantastic physiques. I mean, Grimmick, we'll have to do one on Grimmick. He's the only undefeated bodybuilder ever. Bill Pearl just lost 1 contest. Grimmick lost 0, whereas Pearl only lost 1.
Bill Pearl actually has written that John Grimmick was his idol. John Grimmick is one of the people that inspired him to get into bodybuilding.
Well, that was me too. The first Health and Strength I saw had a picture of John Grimmick doing wrist roller, and I said, I want to look like that.
Yeah, and John Grimmick also inspired Reg Park, Steve Reed. All these guys were inspired by John Grimmick. John Grimmick, by the way, we'll get into that when we talk about it, but he was a true athlete.
Oh
John
yeah.
Griffith was set to compete in the Olympic Games in Berlin as an
Yeah.
Olympic weightlifter. I
He
mean,
told
and
me he
that's
got to meet Hitler then too,
yeah, I got to meet
because he
Hitler,
went. Yeah.
and if you go on YouTube, you can find some early films of John Grimmick doing some flexibility stunts that are absolutely
Amazing.
mind-boggling. He's able to do splits and somersaults. You talk about muscle bound, and
Yeah.
this guy is about as flexible as anybody could possibly be.
He was. He was an amazing guy, and I got some great stories of some interaction I've had with him, and some stories that other people have told me about him that are just say so loud. But Bill Pearl too. I mean, that guy was so nice to me. You know, when I caught him and Leo Stern coming out of there, and stopped to get so I can get a picture with him and all that stuff, just like you said he was. So
Bill Bill Pearl is one of the most popular guys because, even after his retirement, Bill Pearl was always personable and nice to everybody he encountered.
yeah.
He never copped an attitude. He never was nasty to
And if somebody
anybody.
deserved to have one, he does for the accomplishments he's done.
I'm sorry, he
I
what?
said for the accomplishments that he was able to achieve, he deserved that kind of attitude. Some of these guys don't deserve it. They've got one.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Pearl was a true gentleman. Is the best way to describe him. He was a guy with real class.
Never threw a temper tantrum. Never acted
Yeah,
rude. Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Just a,
that's
a
what a representative sport needs to be.
yeah. I mean, and he was a great representative of bodybuilding. Terrific. I mean, of course, Bill Pearl. He also, by the way, one of his hobbies was collecting classic cars. Along with his gym in his garage, he had a separate garage where he had all these classic cars.
Yep.
I'm sure he still has them, but that was his personal thing.
That's
I
what
mean,
he spent a lot of that money on too.
yeah, he
For the
spent a lot
books.
of, yep, he spent a lot of his
Well,
money
I
on
don't.
it.
I guess we should wrap it up. But I suppose we could talk about Bill Pearl for hours. But I
Just
hope
a
our audience enjoys this one.
terrific guy, and hopefully you'll be able to show a lot of people the pictures of Bill Pearl in his prime to illustrate what
Absolutely.
we're about. I mean, Bill, if you want to know what perfect symmetry and proportion is, all you need to go no further than to look at Bill Pearl's physique at his best. And again, he wasn't shredded, he wasn't ripped, he didn't have that monster look. But I would wager that if you showed a picture of Bill Pearl at his best with that great, wonderful tan he used to have, and you compared it to some of the top pro bodybuilders, if you went up to people on the street and you asked them whose physique they'd rather have,
Yeah.
I would guesstimate that 99.9%, and I'm not talking about body, I'm talking about people on the
Yeah.
street, would without question choose Bill Pearl.
Absolutely. Well, Jerry, another good one. I love the stories you have, and I hope the folks do too. And we'll keep doing these. All
Absolutely.
right. You have a good one, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take care.
As Jerry and I said, you can't really appreciate Bill Pearl unless you see him in person. What I've done is I've found an 8mm film of Bill's posing around the time he won the Pro NABA Universe in London. And so I've digitized it and I present it here for your enjoyment. It gives you a clue, if it isn't a clear picture, of how great this man is.